Wait, did that actually just happen? Kathy Engelbert, the WNBA commissioner who spent an entire year performing verbal gymnastics to avoid giving Caitlin Clark sole credit for anything, just said her name, without rattling off 15 other players in the same breath. No Angel Reese attachment. No Aja Wilson footnote. No Paige Bucher's qualifier. Just Caitlin Clark is responsible for the growth. If you've followed this league's messaging strategy for even 5 minutes, you know that's completely out of character. For 12 straight months, Engelbert has treated Clark's name like it needs a disclaimer, as if saying it alone might summon some kind of PR disaster. Every interview, every press conference, every public appearance has followed the same script. Mention Clark, then immediately list 8 other names to distribute the credit so thin that nobody gets recognized for anything specific. It became predictable enough that fans started making bets on how many players she'd name drop in a single answer. But something shifted. On the Pat McAfee Show, Engelbert broke pattern. She gave Clark direct credit without the usual ensemble routine. So, what changed? Did she suddenly grow a spine? Or is something else going on here? Let's examine exactly what Engelbert said, because the specific wording matters here. During her Pat McAfee Show appearance, she was asked about the league's growth and the new media rights deal. Her response was direct in a way we haven't seen before. Caitlin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Without question, has been a huge part of the growth of our league. She's not only an incredible player, but a great ambassador for the game. Read that again. Without question, huge part of our league's growth. No hedging, no qualifiers, no pivot to the collective effort. But here's what makes it even more significant. She didn't just credit Clark for playing well. She called her a great ambassador and specifically mentioned her work with NBA on NBC. This isn't just acknowledging stats or rookie performance. This is recognizing Clark's value beyond the court, her media presence, her ability to draw audiences that have never watched women's basketball. That's a complete tonal shift from every other public statement Engelbert has made in the past year. Compare this to literally any other interview she's done. CNN in August, she listed 6 names. New York Times profile in September, 8 players mentioned in one answer. Playoff press conference, a dozen names rattled off so fast, it sounded like she was reading a roster sheet. The pattern was so consistent that it became a running joke. You could set a timer for how quickly she'd pivot from Clark to the incredible rookie class, or the established veterans who built this league. Sports commentators started doing supercuts of her, deflections, counting how many seconds it took before she name-dropped someone else. There's no ensemble cast in this McAfee clip, no mention of the rookie class that changed everything, no credit to the players who came before. Just a straightforward acknowledgement that Caitlin Clark has been the driving force behind the WNBA's transformational year. And notice she didn't just say a part of the growth. She said a huge part. That's not language you use when you're trying to spread credit around. That's language you use when you're admitting something you've been avoiding for months. The question isn't whether this represents growth in Engelbert's thinking. The question is, why now? And why on this specific platform? To understand why this McAfee moment matters, you need to understand the pattern Engelbert established throughout 2024. Every single time she was asked about the league's explosive growth in attendance, viewership, or media attention, she deployed the same strategy. Distribute credit so widely that no individual player could be identified as the primary reason. It was like watching someone try to avoid saying a specific name, constantly redirecting to the broader narrative. It started during Clark's rookie season, when the ratings numbers became impossible to ignore. Indiana Fever games were drawing audiences 3 times larger than any other team. Reporters started asking the obvious question, what's driving this? And Engelbert's response was always the same carefully constructed deflection. She'd acknowledge Clark's talent, then immediately pivot to Angel Reese's impact, Aja Wilson's MVP campaign, the resurgence of veteran stars, and the overall quality of play across the league. She'd mention Sabrina Ionescu's shooting performance, Breanna Stewart's championship pursuit, and sometimes even throw in historical context about players who built the foundation years ago. The New York Times did a feature on the WNBA's breakthrough season, and in that interview, Engelbert mentioned 8 different players by name when asked specifically about what changed in 2024. 8 players, for a question that had a pretty obvious one-word answer based on every measurable metric available. ESPN's coverage following the playoffs saw her list a dozen names in response to a question about why viewership doubled. A dozen names to explain a phenomenon that coincided exactly with one player's entry into the league. Fans started keeping count. There were Twitter threads documenting how many players Engelbert would mention in a single answer. The record was 14 names in one response during a press conference after the All-Star break. 14. It became such a noticeable pattern that even mainstream sports media started commenting on it. Analysts would joke about taking bets on whether she could get through an answer without mentioning at least 5 players. The deflection wasn't subtle. It was so obvious and so consistent that it became part of the story itself. And it wasn't just Engelbert. The entire league seemed to be operating under the same messaging directive. Coaches, when asked about attendance spikes, would credit the overall talent level. Team executives, when discussing ticket sales, would talk about the exciting rookie class, plural, never singular. It was coordinated damage control disguised as generous credit distribution. Here's where things get interesting. Pat McAfee isn't your typical sports media personality, especially when it comes to the WNBA. He doesn't rely on the league for credentials, access, or exclusive content. He's not worried about maintaining relationships with team executives or getting invited to press events. His platform exists completely independent of the WNBA's media ecosystem, which means he can say things that league-dependent journalists can't. And Engelbert knows this. She watched what happened last season when McAfee did a 5-minute segment breaking down the ratings data. He put together a presentation showing exact viewership numbers, game by game, with Clark versus without Clark. Indiana Fever games with Caitlin Clark averaged 1.2 million viewers, WNBA games without her, under 400,000. He didn't editorialize or add hot takes. He just displayed the numbers on screen and let the data tell the story. That segment went viral, got picked up by every major sports outlet, and created a problem for the league's messaging strategy. Because suddenly, you couldn't pretend the growth was equally distributed. The numbers were public, verifiable, and stark. McAfee showed that Angel Reese's Chicago Sky games averaged 640,000 viewers compared to Clark's 1.2 million. He demonstrated that even Aja Wilson's championship-winning Las Vegas Aces couldn't crack 500,000 viewers in games where Clark wasn't the opponent. The data destroyed the ensemble narrative that Engelbert had been carefully constructing. And here's the thing. McAfee has 3.2 million subscribers. His show reaches an audience that dwarfs most WNBA media coverage. These aren't die-hard basketball fans who follow every storyline. They're casual sports viewers who care about what's real, not what the league wants them to believe. So when Engelbert agreed to appear on his show, she was walking into an environment where the usual spin wouldn't work. McAfee has the receipts. He's got the viewership data, the attendance records, the social media metrics. If she tried her standard routine of listing 10 players as contributors to growth, he could interrupt with a graphic showing that 9 of those players don't move the ratings needle at all. That's not speculation. It's exactly what he did during last year's coverage. He fact-checked the league's narrative in real time with publicly available data. You can't gaslight someone who's already done the homework. Let's talk about what actually happened behind the scenes while Engelbert was publicly spreading credit across the roster. The WNBA just finalized a media rights deal worth $200 million per year over 11 years, starting in 2026. That represents a 500% increase from their previous agreement. The league's official position is that this growth resulted from collective effort, improved play across the board, and strategic marketing. But the negotiating rooms told a completely different story. When ESPN and NBC were evaluating whether to increase their investment by $500 million, they weren't looking at general league metrics. They were examining which specific games generated viewership that justified higher rights fees. The data they analyzed was brutally clear. During the 2024 season, the 10 most watched WNBA games all featured Caitlin Clark. All 10. Not 9 out of 10, with one exception. Not a mix of high-profile matchups. Every single top-rated game had Clark on the court. The contrast gets even sharper when you look at the games that didn't feature her. The highest-rated WNBA game without Clark drew 820,000 viewers. That's respectable for the league's standards. But here's the thing. Clark's lowest-rated game pulled 1.1 million viewers. Her worst performance from a rating standpoint outdrew the best game that didn't include her. From a pure business perspective, the networks weren't investing in the WNBA as a league. They were investing in Caitlin Clark games with occasional appearances by other teams. That's not opinion or hot take material. That's what the viewership data showed the executives writing the checks. The people making nine-figure decisions weren't swayed by narratives about collective growth or ensemble casts. They looked at ratings, demographics, and advertising potential, and every single metric pointed to one player as the driver of value. Think about what that means for Engelbert's messaging strategy. She spent all year telling the public that growth was distributed across multiple stars, that the rookie class collectively elevated the league, that established veterans deserved equal credit. But when she sat down with the people actually paying for media rights, that story didn't fly. They had the data. They knew exactly what they were buying. So her Pat McAfee appearance represents a rare moment where public messaging had to align with private reality. She couldn't maintain the fiction in front of an audience sophisticated enough to know better. The WNBA operated under a specific philosophy throughout 2024. The idea was that you could manufacture multiple stars through equal promotion. If you mentioned Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark together enough times, eventually the public would view them as equivalent draws. If you highlighted A'ja Wilson's MVP credentials alongside Clark's Rookie of the Year campaign, maybe casual fans would tune in for both. The league genuinely believed that promotional parity could create actual parity in audience interest. That strategy failed spectacularly, and the ratings data documented every step of the failure. When ESPN promoted a Chicago Sky versus Indiana Fever game as Angel versus Caitlin, the viewership was strong, pulling over 1 million viewers. The rivalry narrative worked. But then they promoted a Sky versus Connecticut Sun game as Angel Reese against the defending Eastern Conference champions. The viewership dropped to 480,000. The audience wasn't interested in Angel Reese as a standalone attraction. They were interested in the rivalry, and only when Clark was on the opposite side. The same pattern repeated with every player the league tried to elevate to Clark's level. A'ja Wilson won MVP, Finals MVP, and a championship. Her Las Vegas Aces were promoted as a dynasty in the making, a team that could define an era. The league put its full marketing weight behind the Aces, creating documentary content, highlight packages, and promotional campaigns. And yet, Aces games without Clark, as the opponent, averaged under 500,000 viewers. A championship team with the league's MVP couldn't crack the ratings that Clark generated in meaningless regular season games. Sabrina Ionescu got the same treatment. Her record-breaking three-point shooting performance should have been a huge draw. The New York Liberty marketed her heavily, positioned her as a homegrown star in the league's biggest market. But Liberty games without Clark in the building drew 550,000 viewers on average. Respectable, but nowhere near the numbers that justified the equal billing promotion strategy. The league threw enormous resources at creating multiple stars, and the only one who actually moved the needle was the one they seemed most reluctant to center in their marketing. Here's what makes this particularly frustrating. The league had evidence of what works. Clark's Iowa games in her final college season averaged 3.4 million viewers. Her WNBA debut drew 2.1 million, the most watched WNBA game in 16 years. Every single data point screamed the same message, but the league kept trying to force a different reality into existence. The WNBA is discovering something that traditional leagues learned years ago. You can't control the narrative when independent media has bigger reach than your official channels. Pat McAfee's show gets more viewers per episode than most WNBA broadcasts. His clips get shared millions of times across social media, and he's not alone in this new ecosystem. YouTube channels covering the WNBA are pulling view counts that exceed the league's official highlight videos. Podcasts analyzing the league's decisions reach audiences that dwarf traditional sports journalism coverage. This matters because these independent voices aren't beholden to the league for access. A beat writer covering the WNBA needs credentials, locker room access, and interview opportunities. If they publish something the league doesn't like, they risk losing that access. It creates an incentive structure that favors friendly coverage over honest analysis. But McAfee doesn't need WNBA credentials. He's not trying to get exclusive interviews with coaches or backstage access to league events. He can say exactly what the data shows without worrying about consequences. The same applies to independent content creators. There are YouTube channels breaking down WNBA stats, analyzing front office decisions, and critiquing league messaging that have zero dependence on official league cooperation. They're building audiences by providing analysis that traditional media won't touch. And when those creators show viewership charts demonstrating that Clark's games outdraw everyone else by 300%, the league can't shut down that conversation. They can't pull credentials or restrict access because those tools don't work against independent platforms. This is the environment Engelbert is now navigating. She can still deploy the ensemble narrative in traditional media settings. ESPN, which just signed a massive media rights deal with the WNBA, has incentive to promote the league broadly. They need multiple stars to justify their investment, so their coverage tends to align with the league's preferred messaging. But the moment Engelbert steps outside that controlled environment and into McAfee's world, she has to deal with facts. He's got the viewership data pulled up on screen. He's got charts showing attendance records. He's got social media metrics demonstrating engagement levels. Watch what happens when commissioners and league officials face actual scrutiny instead of friendly questions designed to generate positive soundbites. The truth comes out. Not because they suddenly developed integrity or had a change of heart, but because the cost of lying becomes too high when someone can fact-check you in real time. So, is this Pat McAfee appearance a turning point? Or just a temporary moment of honesty that Engelbert will walk back the next time she's in friendlier territory? Based on her track record, Smart Money says she reverts to the ensemble routine within a week. The next time she's interviewed by traditional WNBA media, we'll probably hear about the incredible depth of talent, the rising stars across multiple teams, and the collective effort that's elevating the league. Because that's the party line, and abandoning it would require admitting they've been misleading people all year. But here's why this moment matters, regardless of whether it represents permanent change. It establishes that Engelbert knows the truth. She's not confused about who's driving growth. She's not genuinely convinced it's a collective effort built on equal contributions. She knows exactly what the numbers show, and when she's in an environment where spin won't work, she'll admit it. That means every future deflection is a conscious choice to mislead, not an honest difference of opinion. It's not that she sees the data differently. It's that she's choosing to present it dishonestly when she thinks she can get away with it. Other leagues figured this out decades ago. The NBA didn't pretend that Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were just two of many stars saving basketball in the 1980s. They built entire marketing campaigns around those two players, leaned into the rivalry, and let it drive unprecedented growth. Everyone benefited. Players who weren't Magic or Bird, saw their salaries increase, their endorsement opportunities expand, and their league profile rise because the overall attention lifted all boats. The NHL didn't distribute credit equally when Wayne Gretzky was rewriting the record books. They promoted him relentlessly, and the league thrived. But the WNBA seems determined to learn this lesson the hard way. They're going to keep trying to manufacture stars through equal promotion. They're going to keep being confused when the ratings show that audiences don't care about the players they're trying to push. And they're going to keep putting Engelbert in situations where she has to either tell the truth or look foolish in front of people who know better. The league is sitting on a generational talent who's bringing unprecedented attention and money. The smart move is obvious. Embrace it, promote Clark aggressively, and let everyone benefit from the rising tide. But they seem more interested in protecting feelings than maximizing the opportunity. What we're witnessing is a league trying to serve two masters simultaneously, and it's creating messaging chaos. On one hand, the WNBA needs Caitlin Clark's drawing power to justify the media deals, expansion plans, and sponsorship agreements that are transforming the league's financial future. On the other hand, they're terrified that centering one player will create resentment among other stars, leading to ugly headlines about jealousy and division that could damage the league's image. So they've adopted this bizarre double-speak strategy. When talking to sophisticated audiences who already know the numbers, like network executives or independent media platforms with their own data, Engelbert tells the truth. Clark is the driver. But when addressing casual fans through traditional league media, she maintains the ensemble fiction, hoping people won't look closely enough to notice the contradiction. It's the kind of strategy that only works if you completely control the media environment. And the WNBA is learning they don't control it anymore. The cracks in this approach are showing everywhere. Stephanie White got hired as Indiana Fever's head coach, and in her introductory press conference, a reporter asked about coaching a generational talent. Simple question. What's it like to get to work with Caitlin Clark? White's response was textbook WNBA deflection. She acknowledged Clark's talent, then immediately pivoted to talking about all the players who came before her and built the league. Nobody asked about the players who came before. The question was specifically about Clark, but White couldn't help herself. She had to redistribute credit, had to make sure nobody watching thought Clark was special in isolation. This pattern extends throughout the organization. Coaches, when asked about attendance spikes at their arenas, talk about overall league quality. Team executives, when discussing record merchandise sales, credit the exciting rookie class in plural form. It's coordinated messaging designed to avoid giving one player too much credit, but it creates resentment on all sides. Clark's fans resent the league for not properly promoting the player who's driving growth. Other players resent Clark for getting attention they think should be shared more equally, and everyone ends up frustrated because the league won't pick a lane and commit to it. The irony is that honest promotion would actually solve these problems. If the league openly acknowledged that Clark is the primary draw and built marketing around that reality, it would set clear expectations and allow other players to benefit from the increased attention without unrealistic pressure to match her impact. At least now we have the Pat McAfee clip as proof that Cathy Engelbert knows exactly what's happening. She understands who's driving the WNBA's growth, who's responsible for the media deals, and who's bringing unprecedented attention to the league. This wasn't a slip of the tongue or momentary honesty. It was the reality that emerges when a commissioner faces media that won't accept spin without pushing back with facts. McAfee created an environment where telling the truth was easier than maintaining the fiction, and Engelbert took the path of least resistance. The question now is whether this represents a turning point or just an isolated moment. Will she start acknowledging Clark's unique impact in all public appearances, or revert to the ensemble routine the next time she's in front of WNBA-friendly media? History suggests she'll go right back to listing 8 names the next time someone asks about league growth. But this McAfee appearance matters because it establishes a baseline. We can point to this moment and say, "You admitted the truth here, so why are you lying now?" Eventually, the cognitive dissonance becomes impossible to maintain. The WNBA has a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Whether they're smart enough to embrace it remains to be seen. To stay locked with my channel, Simply Explained, for more update.